So, welcome today back to the performance marketing track. And the next presentation is by Taylor Ryan. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today, and he has pre-recorded his presentation. But before we get started with the recorded presentation, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Taylor. So, Taylor is an American entrepreneur living in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and he's a six-time startup founder with 14 years of marketing and startup experience. Currently, Taylor runs an award-winning digital marketing agency, Clint Marketing, and online growth and hacking course with over 6,500 graduates. growthsecrets.org. Taylor has built and run the marketing department for some of Denmark's most successful startups over the last 15 years. His efforts have resulted in 4 exits, 1 IPO, 1 merger, and 2 acquisitions. So let's get started with his presentation that he has recorded for us. Before we go and leave, just because, of course, Tyler isn't here, you will be able to give, or let's say, send in your questions to Tyler directly. We have posted in the chat area the link to his LinkedIn profile. There you can go and connect with him and send him questions which you might have. So after the recording, there will not be a Q&A. So that's it, and we start the presentation now.
Yeah, we're rolling. Thank you for having me. I put on my good webcam for you guys. No, I'm just kidding. I got a lot of areas to cover, so I'm going to move really quickly. The whole idea behind this is if I move too fast for you, connect with me on LinkedIn. I will give you the slides. Unless we are direct one-for-one competitors, then you will not get the slides. So a little bit about me. My name is Taylor. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but I've been in the startup scene for going on 14, almost 15 years now. I'm the CEO and founder of Clint and Growth Secrets, and those are kind of the 2 big companies that I'm running. But as you can see, I've got my hands full. I'm building a accelerator for Web3, and I've kind of tied up a bunch of loose ends with getting a VC firm for Web3 going as well. So if you are interested in that space or want to jam out or you're in Web3, please connect with me on the old LinkedIn. I'm the only Taylor Ryan that I'm aware of in Denmark. And there's not many Taylor Ryans in Europe. So yeah, a little more about some of my background. I've scaled up some of the fastest moving startups within Denmark. So Planday, GenieBell, Actimo, and Valuer either came in as a leader within the marketing department or the CMO, and that has resulted in 1 IPO, 2 acquisitions, and 1 merger. The whole idea here is I like to think that, yeah, a lot of the automation that I've put in and a lot of the things that I've worked out have really played out in nice ways for other companies. I work with a lot of accelerators, actually 2 this week, so I'm getting involved with another one first thing tomorrow morning. Crazy. But yeah, these are just some of the ones that I work with on a regular basis. So yeah, lots to jam out. And if you're involved with an accelerator, please hit me up. The agency, as I mentioned before, is Clint. We're a growth hacking and digital marketing agency. I also run Growth Secrets, which is an online masterclass priced unreasonably low at $49. These are some of the different results and growth models that I work with. The goal for today is to provide value. I want to hit a lot of different things that most people don't maybe use with their outbound strategy, and also look at a couple of different plays within that space. But again, I move really quick. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Taylor Ryan, if you want the slides. So normally I would be doing the interactive portion of this where I'd be like, oh, where's everybody from? Or I'd at least ask, like, how many people are in startups? How many people are maybe more on the technical side? All that stuff. But yeah, we're not in person. So here's the other way of looking at it, which I always think is super interesting, is kind of finding out some of people's definitions of growth hacking. The way that I define it is growth hacking is doing the most with the least amount of time and money in order to get the biggest results. I never want to do a 1-for-1 approach. I'm always trying to do the 1 for 50, 1 for 1,000, 1 for 1,000,000. So that means like the repetitive actions that are not scalable go away in favor of optimization and efficiency via testing using lots of different tools to replace those manual processes. So like the metaphor that I always use when referring to growth hackers, and it depends, I guess, on your background, but I basically say your car breaks down and there's two mechanics on duty. The first mechanic has read every book about fixing automobiles over the last 5 years, but has never actually been under the hood. And the other person has dirt underneath their fingernails, and they've fixed all kinds of makes and models over the same period of time. I want the second person to fix my car, not necessarily because they have dirtier hands, but because they've come across lots of unique and strange and interesting cases, and they've tried different things, and now they have a bit more familiarity. As growth hackers, we need to have that experience by trying lots of things. And if you're new to marketing or you haven't maybe played in some of the execution area for a while, I think we all can probably agree that a lot of different jobs are basically just mastering systems. And marketing is all about systems. So like every circle there kind of represents a node that's interconnected. So for me, it was content. I got into content super deep, actually video production originally, but then I started getting into writing, and that led me to understand, oh, there's technical processes within this. And the more that I dug into SEO, I'm like, oh, like there's a whole nother thing here when it revolves around like digital ads. And you just keep learning these things, and like you kind of stack the abilities from there. So I will reference a handful of tools. Just bear in mind that tools are just ingredients. And I like to think of any growth hack or working growth hack is basically just throwing a couple of ingredients together and seeing if it tastes good or there's a nice outcome. So marketing technology landscape, 2011, lots of tools, right? Just flash forward a few years and it more than doubled. And then it's like, okay, cool. That couldn't possibly happen again. Bam, 2020. And I haven't even looked for the 2022 one at this point. But the reality is the landscape is moving so fast. So the tools that I use and the ones that I reference are just ones that I've had experience in, but literally there's tools now for literally every single thing. So trying to do stuff manually, or I don't know, the archaic system of just, one for one, like it doesn't make sense when there's so many systems out there and so many tools that make things move 1,000 times faster. So as I stated before, I move really fast. So connect with me on LinkedIn if you want the slides. I do not give my slides to direct competitors, but still happy to connect. So I'll be covering a lot of ground today. There's an intro, which is kind of what you got a flavor of just now. There's outbound hacks. I'll go in. You guys can read. I'm going to go into this stuff. I think it's important to agree on some of the theory because a lot of people maybe just don't have kind of the strategy side of this just yet. So the first thing, and it's in every presentation nearly that I create, it's the Pareto principle. It's the 80-20 rule. So 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. So think of it like 80% of your traffic is from 20% of your content, or 20% of your salespeople close 80% of the deals. 80% of the alcohol is drank by 20% of the population. The concept here is that you're going to find that whatever output that you're doing, whether it's ads, outbound marketing, social media even, that might end up garnering the vast majority of the leads for your business, your model, your niche, your industry. So it's important to discover what that is, and that comes through trial and error and testing and all that stuff. It is so important to follow processes. That way you can mix things up. You can take things out, plug them back in, and be like, cool, that was the element of my process that was broken. There's an awesome video by Milton Friedman that basically covers this whole idea of nobody alive can create a pencil because nobody has the background and the knowledge and the sheer understanding of how to chop down a tree in order to get all the wood together. But in order to chop down that tree, you actually need to forge out of iron a nice saw or an axe. And then in order to mine the graphite, you actually have to build the infrastructure for that. So think about it like we don't need to necessarily build from absolute zero. And if we have bulletproof processes, it makes it very easy to mix things in and test so that we know with some level of certainty something's working. Back to the Pareto principle, I absolutely believe this. This is from Visible that shows basically in many cases you can drive 60% of your leads compared to the efforts of all the others. I've certainly found this with old school businesses like we should be doing more cold calling. It's like, when the fuck did that ever work? In the last decade at least. I'm not waiting for people to call me. I'm not excited when they do call. I've never been closed, at least not within I don't know, any memory that I have over the phone from a perfect stranger. The reality is more people are gravitating towards these digital methods also because they're more scalable. One of the last things I'll get into on the theory side before jumping into funnels is just the whole idea of marketing is kind of having this crazy schism. There's data-driven marketers, and then there's bullshit artists and storytellers. Please start becoming the data-driven growth hacker, the technical marketer, because there's a future there for you. So I'm going to go really briefly into marketing funnels just to flash over it. That way we can agree that everything is a funnel, and sales outbound from the standpoint of cold outreach is the same. So if we are focused on B2B, which cold outreach, that's the only way that I'm going to be advocating for this. I'm not telling people to do like purchasing lists. Like that's not GDPR compliant. It's not even possible to do cold outreach for B2C. So this is purely for B2B people. And it is a much harder play when you're in the B2B sector, but I'll move on. There's a new versus old kind of funnel that I 100% believe, especially with some of the companies that I've been working with, where marketing basically does 90% of the work. The old days was basically like marketing would be like, well, we got through the phone book and we found these 10 companies you sales folks need to call. Like nowadays, like we're doing literally every step of the way until it's at the very end and it's primed and ready and warmed up for a salesperson to basically just have a demo and they're like, yeah, okay, let's go. So it's a very different system these days. If we're building off of content, every step of the funnel has different types of content. This isn't about content today. I'm going to move on. Ads has its own kind of setup, and there's different networks that help with every step of the funnel. In the way that we do outreach, it is, of course, going to be a sales funnel that they eventually end up getting into. So visit lead, MQL, marketing qualified lead, SQL, sales qualified lead, opportunity, and then customer. Moving right along, Pirate Metrics, Dave McClure, this thing's now like 14 years old, but it's more just adding stuff on to the end of the funnel. And yeah, that's kind of the whole jam. Like that's what funnels are all about. The whole reason we're doing any of this stuff is we are nudging people to buy our product or service. And that is really what we need to be focused on as marketers, especially when somebody's like, that is why I hired you, or that is the only way our company will stay in business. So I often try to do a mapping of how people become customers. In many cases, maybe outbound is one of your strongest channels. So if that's the case, then I think we got some interesting ways of doing it. Now, I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of each individual like micro level step, but I will give you some interesting stuff to work with. So outbound hacks. I love doing outbound hacks. I think of all the agencies that I've come across, especially within the Nordics, a lot of people are shy on GDPR and there's maybe a bit more reservation on this. And a lot of people just suck at it, to be totally honest. So like, I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff. So this is one of the most common things that I get within marketing, whether it's snail mail, like people sending postcards, or I don't know, any version of marketing where it's like, well, I've tried it, it doesn't work. And, you know, like ultimately, yeah, your targeting and your messaging has to be off. Like every bit of marketing can work, whether it's ads, SEO, whatever the case is. But if you are not really using the best practices and your different campaigns look like this stuff, then it's like, bruh, you're not even trying. So the reality is like you can't say that you actually did something and you know for certain that it doesn't work in your industry because you haven't done it with enough best practices. And I hear that a lot from either clients or people that are coming up to me after events like, yeah, ads don't work for us. And it's like, okay, well then, you know, you suck at ads. That's all. So like the reality is it's not anybody's fault. It's just we have to try enough things to absolutely determine like we have found the best possible scenario in this particular area of marketing, but we find that maybe running ads is more effective or maybe doing outreach is. So for me, everything comes down to like a process, as I mentioned. And I have a bunch of different examples of like street food vendors and people doing whatever the hell that is. So like the idea is like there's no stutter step. There's no moment of hesitation. It's smooth, it's fluid, and it really only exists in this form because there's no other way to get any faster than what they're doing. So the idea is that we need to find what the smoothest, simplest format of our process to do outreach is. So first, we're going to get some burner domains and do some email warmups. Then we're going to figure out the right intent signal. Beyond that, it goes into targeting and segmentation to then be able to find emails, validate those emails, send out some pretty good messaging, and make sure that we've set up our outreach to do sequences of 3 emails over the span of 1, 2, and 3 days. Cool. So let's dive in. So burner domains and warm-up emails. This is like the there's like this part in The Simpsons where like Martin is like, did anybody say box kites? And then Homer's like, boo, no, you know, that's like the least exciting thing about all this, but I dig it. So like the old days of running any type of outbound campaigns, you didn't have to worry about ending up in spam. You could just do whatever you wanted. Then GDPR came along, but also it's getting a lot harder with email providers in terms of deliverability rates. And also they're looking way deeper into how you're actually structuring the emails and how many, like what's the frequency that you're getting sent out. So if you're doing the wrong stuff, you'll get messages like this because you're basically, clearly messing up with some of the burner domains and you're forwarding a lot of the emails, and it's very clear that these are basically burner domains. And this is what happens when you end up in the spam folder. And honestly, most people are not checking their spam folder more than once a month. So yeah, there's a lot of bad things that can happen when you blast too many emails. Cool. Sorry, I'm getting way too many Telegram alerts. So what is a burner domain? A burner domain is a domain that is different from your own, which means I own clintmarketing.com, but I also own Clint Reach. And the idea is that if I am sending emails from my company, clintmarketing.com, and I'm blasting too many people, that means every sales proposal that I send over to a potential client also ends up in the spam folder. So I'm buying 2 or 3 burner domains, and I'm warming these emails up and sending the emails from those email addresses that are associated with a non-Clint Marketing email. I'll often add a redirect, and that basically will make sure that if I go to clintreach.com, I end up on Clint Marketing. And it's super easy to do those redirects, but yeah, this is done within your hosting, like really easy. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a domain to the hosting provider, and I use G Suite, so you can go in, click Add Domain, you'll put in the new domain, and then you click Add Domain and start verification. And after that, it's basically, I guess this is like a copy and paste version. Sorry about that. I wanted to take a video of how excited I was to do this. So you can see me down at the bottom right. It's literally that easy. Like if you're logged in under AWS, it does it for you. So it's like, boop, done. And yeah, now I have at least a burner domain that's registered to my G Suite account. Now I have to register an email. And one of the things that I see a lot of people messing up on their burner emails is they do generalized inbox emails, which means you're doing like info at, hello at, general at. I know that if I get an email coming from that, I'm not opening it. You know, like it's clearly not meant for me. It's junk. So I usually create an email with a fake name, but if you're against that life and don't want to live in that world, that's fine. You can use a real name. If you go to fakenamegenerator.com, you can select the country and the gender, and then you get a fake name, and then you can go to thispersondoesnotexist.com. You get a profile image of that person. So lots of different ways to do it. I don't know. I would name them Rasmus Rasmussen if they were in Denmark, but I digress. So sometimes people ask, which I think is kind of funny, and it's a whole can of worms, should I pick a male or female name? And this is not something that I want to get hate mail about. I'm just using the numbers that I got, and I'm not going to give them to you. But yeah, there's a much higher open rate when I've sent it from my fake accounts, Alina Davies, versus this pig-faced gentleman that you see before you. I get higher click-through rates when I use her. I get higher response rates. And I think 1 month I ended up getting like 15 meetings set via her versus the 5 that I had set with myself. So yeah, it's a thing, and you know, that's what it is. Do with that information what you will. But yeah, not interested in having lots of woke debate, so please hold off on that if it's all the same to you. So email warm-ups are a thing. An email warm-up is basically a service that sends seemingly real emails that are individualized back and forth to other email accounts, making it look like you're having real conversations. So the email server that you are registered with is like, well, this person's sending lots of daily emails. The thought process being, now it looks like you're doing genuine things back and forth. So whatever's hosting you, whether it's Gmail or maybe you're on Outlook, they're willing to give you more access to the world so you can start going from 20 to 30 emails a day to 40 to 60. And those are the tools off to the right. Everybody's got their favorites, but yeah, there's some that are free, there's some that are relatively inexpensive, but that's the idea. So now I have emails that are warmed up, and by the way, like the timeline, minimum of 60 days. I've seen some people that are like 14 weeks, and it's like, okay, that's a while. So even if you're not feeling it, like do it now. Maybe you'll change your mind in 14 weeks. Cool. So user intent is a huge area of anybody that does ads. It's also a huge area of content that I focus on, but it's definitely a huge indicator of who I should be reaching out to. People send signals that they need you to understand or when they're ready for you. And some examples might be yawning when you're ready for sleep, or tensing up when you're feeling aggressive, or mouth watering when you're hungry. But somebody's also putting out signals potentially that you could read when they're ready to buy. So towards the end of the funnel, you have the decision stage, and people usually fall into 3 different areas. There's not buying, there's consideration, and there's ready to buy. This is the only states that somebody can be in. And the 3 things that need to be present in every deal, and every deal that I've managed to strike, is they have a need, and that basically is something that our solution hopefully is fixing. The timing is there because they've made the problem now, fixing the problem, a priority, and they actually have resources to fix that problem because they've paid me in order to do that work. So I have been on a mission to figure out where I can get this kind of data. And some of you might have already guessed, or some of you may be already doing this, but I'll provide an example. So let's say I'm a cybersecurity company and I'm looking for intent signals. They have to have a need, they have to have timing, and they have to have resources. It's job boards. So if I see that somebody's looking for a cybersecurity specialist, in all likelihood, if I run a cybersecurity company, I should be able to reach out and be like, hey, super interesting situation here. I saw that you're looking for this particular person. Maybe we could have a conversation about this, because the likelihood of you having to spend a ton of time posting jobs, reviewing applications, running tons of interviews, sending an offer, negotiating, onboarding, just to find out, that somebody's actually pretty bad at their job. Like, how much does hiring suck? So the reality is, maybe reaching out to those people when they're starting to really consider the last thing before they pull the trigger on solving their problem is the opportunity for you to step in. I've done this with chatbot solutions. I've done this with myself. I've done this with lots of other solutions, and it seems to work quite all right. So the company is called Clint Data. You can go to Clint Data right now and get into the wait list. But yeah, it's been a year and 4 months, so we're about ready to release. Super exciting. So yeah, the whole idea is that's a really different way of going about doing it, but I'll show you how I've done it historically and some of the ways that a lot of other people do. So targeting is super interesting. Let's say that we're going on, LinkedIn Navigator. We want to scrape a bunch of people that are this particular job title within this industry. At the very least, I'm then able to A/B test the 2 against each other, which is super helpful. That way I can say with some level of certainty, COOs are the people that don't buy from us, but people within this industry at least give us a look. So we get a little closer every time. Everything within B2B and B2C, and I'm sure we've all heard this before, it's like spear fishing versus using a net. So I have a buddy that makes ejection seats for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which means his total addressable market is under 10 people worldwide. Versus I know somebody that has a tennis shoe company, and it's well, everybody needs shoes, So the idea is we have to think about our business and our targets the same way. So B2B, we have to stay relatively narrow focused, but go with city. I think it's really interesting to test different messaging on cities, and it shows that you're aware of where they are. The industry, obviously, you can tailor the messaging around that. Departments that might end up being more susceptible, employees, traffic, business model, etc. on size. Like, it's all the same stuff. And I think my biggest issue with a lot of organizations that try to do like enterprise level sales or just honestly B2B sales is most people are like, no, CEO, that's who we got to talk to. And it's like the CEO doesn't engage with the problem. The CEO is not familiar with the issues of the day to day. All they want to do is slap down the credit card and be like, make me more money and go fucking fix it. Like, honestly, that's every CEO that I've ever known. So the reality is you're looking for like sometimes a middle up or even a bottom up. The people that are actually experiencing the biggest pain points are in many cases your buyers, not necessarily senior management that's like super distance from it. And so you might want to look into that when you start separating out some of the targeting in terms of years of experience and all these different things. I don't know, if you need help on like scraping LinkedIn, hit me up. That's kind of what we do. So yeah, cool. So discovery is one of those crazy things. I can't tell you how many companies I've run into these days that are like, now we got an intern to Google stuff. And it's like, yo, what year are you living in? That's crazy. Like 2001 called, where are you at? So stop doing that. There are so many different platforms to find leads. Like it's baffling that that's even a thing anymore. So the last slide had a bunch. Here's a few more. This is GDPR compliant. So yeah, enjoy. Live your best life. That's crazy. So buyer intent is something that I love digging into. And I think even if you're not doing outreach, you still have the ability to look around and see maybe different angles. So I've done separate outreach for people that are already in my email list because they didn't respond to the sequence that I basically automated for them. So I always try to figure out like, what are people asking just before they consider buying? Like, because that's usually a pretty big part of the decision process is like, what are they questioning or wondering about just before they pull that trigger? So I've found that giving away an imperfect solution really warms up my audience. So when I was working over at Planday, it was easy to create basically an Excel sheet that did all the same things as the app, but had none of the user experience and none of real like capabilities of it. So in a way, employee scheduling app is basically way more functional than a spreadsheet, but it's like, yeah, here's your fucking sheet, go for it. And yeah, people were downloading it like crazy. The reality is I knew that this wouldn't fix their problem. And the problem was they were spending way too much time managing people and rescheduling and all that stuff. And it was an imperfect solution overall. So that indicated to me that they had this problem and they were probably in the market for my solution right then because they were looking for it. Another example was Let's Build, the construction project management tool. I basically made another sheet, and the big problem that they were trying to solve was just inefficiency and lack of being able to schedule, which is kind of what the platform does. And ultimately, if somebody downloaded my imperfect solution, it means, look, they have the problem, they're probably in my market, and these are people that are ready to fix their problem right now. Actimo was an internal communication tool. Kind of had the same jam where I made like an 8-page internal communication plan. And yeah, the people that were looking for our tool also had that issue. Last one was Valuer. It's basically a AI for discovery for innovation. In any event, yeah, it was really hard for people to discover good startups. So I gave like really long, kind of not interesting lists that anybody could make up. And yeah, lots of people downloaded. Lots of other things that you can do in the world of content would be how to fix somebody's problem or what happens when you don't fix somebody's problem. And that's an example of that. But the whole idea is I knew that those people that downloaded that were probably experiencing the issue that I was solving for. And that's a really cool way to do outreach. Cool, let's jump back in. So verifying emails, I love reducing the bounce rates on these things because otherwise you're burning your burner domains. So it's super easy to pick up one of these tools. I tend to use ClearOut, but the whole idea is you have to validate these emails because I think if we're all being honest, a lot of people are moving jobs and a lot of people lost their jobs. There's crazy statistics out there. Like 55% of Americans anticipate looking for a new job. This is what data decay is. So all of these like really fancy databases and like scrapers and lists that I showed, their data is basically inaccurate every microsecond that goes by because people move, they leave, they get fired, they quit. So just bear in mind that that's something that you're going to continue to have to check over. Cool. Messaging. So messaging is the area that I think most people screw up on. I'm like a huge proponent of getting people to use templates that work. And the example given here is like, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Is it because one, you're busy, but now you're ready to talk, so you want me to schedule a call with you? Or two, you're not interested, you want me to leave you alone? Or three, you're being chased by a hippo and you want me to call for help? And it's like, nice one, Bob. You ever come up with anything fucking original in the last like 20 years? I received this particular email prompt literally once every quarter, once every 3 months. And the first time I got it was like 2009. So like, it's super old. So like use good stuff. And there's lots of good stuff out there, like tons. So really good emails has some interesting cases for outbound. Mild is interesting, but honestly, like the best stuff is just do a quick Google search, like outbound email campaigns, outbound email templates, amazing, personalized outbound, that kind of stuff. You'll find it. It's out there. The best templates you create because they're in your voice, they're in your feeling, you know the product, you're talking about yourself. It's so much easier to be genuine when you're writing something yourself rather than trying to like cobble together somebody else's voice, somebody else's jam. And honestly, it's kind of part of like the fun part of being in marketing. So I use a lot of memes, and these are more examples of some of the memes that at least take a playful angle at what we're trying to solve. And if you don't have a sense of humor, then that's crazy. Like, go find one. Like that, I don't understand how you get that far in life and be like, I don't know what humor is. I mean, some people have products that just don't have any humor built in, but like that sounds like a terrible industry. So maybe consider being a part of that 55%, make a job change. One of the other things that I've found to be super fascinating is liquid templates. Not a lot of people are doing them, but it allows you to also reduce the amount of duplications of emails. A lot of these different email providers are starting to realize that if you're sending the same email 50 times over, it's not meant to be a back and forth conversation. It's meant to be spammy. So using variables on top of variables is what liquid templates are all about. Do some Google searches on YouTube. You'll find some really interesting videos. But the whole context here is basically if the target person is a CEO or a head of marketing or even a CFO, you're going to talk about different features in different ways. Therefore, your email copy should take a different flow. So many things going through on the old Telegram. The first line is one of the most important, and most people don't use any tools for this. There are lots of AI-generated tools that are now working on basically pulling any type of data that either comes off of the URL of the website, the company LinkedIn, or the profile LinkedIn page of the individual to then craft the first line, because that is what people read once they get into that email. And why you go with playful email outreach is because people have a positive response to it. These are just some of the people that are like, oh my God, it's amazing. Like, I love your tailor-made email. It's like, nope, it was definitely a template, but thanks for asking. Then the last little bit here is sequenced outreach. Super important to send the sequence, usually depending on how they react. So like I always pause after they respond. That way I'm not sending a follow-up where it's like, dude, I got back to you. But also you can send the outreach sequences based off of whether they open or whether they don't, whether they click or whether they do. I try to keep delays of 1 to 3 days depending on the nature of their responses, but the tools off to the right are all different tools that you can use in order to run those, but you need to have some warmed up emails to do it. Otherwise, everything you send will end up in spam. Staying organized with a CRM is the difference between companies that make it and companies that don't. Otherwise, it's really just like, yeah, blips on a screen, it's guesswork. I think emails that have a lot more within the signature do really well, and I have found that people tend to click more of my signature links than anything else, just out of morbid curiosity, because I certainly do that as well. And any other tools that might actually help move things along: Streak for seeing whether or not people open, Calendly for booking fireflies if you do get that meeting and it records the entire meeting, but some people get really worked out of shape with that, where it's like, I didn't give consent. So it's like, all right, bro, I got you. So last little bit in terms of increasing, yeah, I've already shown this, so I'm going to move on. Follow-ups. Follow-ups is one of my favorite things that, like, when you do set that email or set that event, that date, that meeting, and then you go on kind of the chasing thing, don't ever write I'm just following up, just checking in, just touching base. I found that it's so much better to provide value, and this is also some of the different directions that my content takes within these emails. Cool. I would love to go into LinkedIn automation. There are so many different tools, some that get you blacklisted, some that don't. And these are just some of the ones that I like playing with. I build decision trees off of them. Honestly, there's not enough time for today. I hope that was interesting, or at least somewhat formative, or maybe it wasn't. I'm sorry if it wasn't. But yeah, I've covered a lot of different areas. So this was all related to outbound marketing and a touch of hyper-personalization and all the different kind of nuanced things within it. You can find more material just like this off of growthsecrets.org. It's my online masterclass. I actually now have 7,500 students and growing. Clint Marketing is my growth hacking agency. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on the old LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you for having me. I hope this was valuable. Cool.